speaker today, for your interest in Mexico, things Mexican, Mexican ideas and culture, its people. We look forward to celebrating that interest together during the next hour or so. We will invite Dr. David Laraway, Chair of the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, to offer an invocation.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this beautiful day, for the occasion that we have to be gathered together to learn more of our dear neighbor to the south. We're grateful for the bonds of friendship that bind our countries together. We're grateful for the ambassador and his party that are able to take time out of their busy schedules to spend some time with us and enlighten us with the words that they have to share. We pray that that will bless us with attentiveness and thoughtfulness, that when we leave this meeting, we may do so and be edified and enlightened and resolved to finding ways of working together to make the world a better place. And these things we say and ask humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
It is a pleasure to welcome our guests. I should identify myself first, I guess. My name is John Rosenberg. I'm the Dean of the College of Humanities, and International Vice President Sandy Rogers asked me if I would conduct this meeting in her absence. We're delighted to be able to welcome our distinguished guests from Mexico, beginning with Dr. Alejandro Estivill, the Deputy Chief of Mission and current Acting Ambassador for Mexico to the United States of America. He is joined by his colleagues from the Consul General's Office in Salt Lake City, Consul Eduardo Palomera, and the Deputy Consul Luis Enrique Franco. We're delighted that they can join us and very much appreciate the strong relationship that we have with our colleagues in Salt Lake. In preparation for Ambassador Estivill's remarks, let me tell you just a little bit about his distinguished career. He was born in Mexico City, holds degrees in some very important subjects, Hispanic literature, from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, the UNAM. He also obtained an MA degree and a PhD in literature at the Colegio de México. He also holds an MA in diplomatic studies. His diplomatic career is long and distinguished for someone who is so young. He has served as an advisor in the minister's staff, where he began his career as a speechwriter. He's been posted in Costa Rica as the political affairs and media officer, returned as chief of staff to the vice minister of foreign affairs in Mexico City, and later named the director general of cultural affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Relations in Mexico. In addition to his diplomatic and political career, he is a man of letters. He has been a visiting professor at Harvard, and in leveraging his literary education, he is a published author, including the novel El Hombre Bajo la Piel, as well as collections of short stories. He is, in that regard, what we admiringly would call in this country a public intellectual, one who is not only engaged in the nuts and bolts of governance, but who is a part of the public sphere of ideas and contributing to that sphere in very important ways. Before Ambassador Estivill begins his remarks, I would like to present him with the official speaker's plaque. So if you would join me at the podium. This is in appreciation to Alejandro Estivill as guest lecturer of the David M. Kennedy Center for International Studies, March 2nd, 2015. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now, having presented the plaque, you are obligated to give the speech. So, once again, would you please give a warm welcome to Ambassador Alejandro Estivill of Mexico.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rosenberg. Thank you. I feel absolutely flattered, a little bit emotional, I would say. Not only because of the plaque that I thought was going to be given to me at the end, not at the beginning, that applies me a lot, but also the many things that have happened to me during this trip. I would like to tell a little story that in this moment I was asked why I changed from literature to diplomacy, and the culprit was my wife. She said one day, we are not going to live of this, so come on, do something else. And you are sufficiently news junker, you know many things about nothing, that maybe you can go diplomat. I followed her advice and I came in this career. But when I got married, among the different things that my wife brought to our house was a Book of Mormon. And I saw the book and said, why is this here? In a very Catholic country in Mexico. And she said, never I told you that my grandmother was from the church? No, you never told me. The thing is that her grandmother was a member of the church but she died very young. So my mother-in-law was raised by an uncle, and there was no continuity about that, but the book remained in my house. In the mining sector of Hidalgo in Mexico, there was an importance of different missionaries that arrived there, because for the coherence among these families that were in a very rough environment, very difficult. His grandfather died of this, I will not know the word in English, silicosis is the name of a terrible disease that you have when you are a miner. He died of that. And his wife also died, so my mother-in-law ended being a very young daughter. But with that origin, I never realized that book would mean something for me in this moment, in which I'm here in a community in which the church is so relevant, and in which this university has the name of all the important, very, very important people that belong to the church. So I feel very emotional at this moment. So if I'm not going to read very well, you have the reason, and the culprit, as I'm saying, is my wife. How to talk about Mexico-US relations is a difficult task. I will try to make some kind of vision that will spark some of the questions that you may have about what is happening between these two big countries, and what is happening that we believe is going to a new stage. Maybe you have heard about this, about how big is the trade between the two countries, how complicated it is, how many Mexicans, because of migration, are here in the United States. You have heard about that, but the big question is what is next for all of us. Well, thank you for receiving me and trying to talk about this. I think the vision about the future of our relations is based far and foremost on our shared economic space, and the opportunity that constantly grow out of this reality is deeply linked to the conceptualization of something that I'm going to talk about a lot in here, which is North America. As a region, and the opportunity we have to turn this region, North America, into the most competitive region of the world through increased economic integration. As we speak, our countries are experiencing the fastest economic integration of any other region in any possible way. Last year, we celebrated NAFTA's 20th anniversary, and rightly so, for it represented a big leap forward in the strategic outlook that the rules governing economic integration in the region. Intra-NAFTA trade today exceeds $1 trillion. For the US and Mexico trade is more than 6 times what it was 20 years ago. Bilateral trade between Mexico and the United States has grown from about $80 billion in 1993 to more than $500 billion annually, which translates into approximately $1 million per minute in trade. Politically speaking, a lot of things are going to happen in the Mexico-US border, mostly of them very positive. Mexico is now the third largest trading partner of the US and its second largest export destination. 6 million jobs in the US depend on exports to Mexico, and 55,000 jobs here in Utah, just in Utah, are the result of our trade. And Utah is not the best example. If you would talk about California, Texas, those figures grow massively. During the last 20 years, Utah export to Mexico have grown by 851%, and so today Mexico has become Utah's largest trading partner with close to $4 billion in trade last year. While the goal of NAFTA was the establishment of a free trade area, something much more significantly has happened. North America has become a region of shared production. We are jointly producing goods through the deeply integrated production and supply chains that have developed as a result of the clear, stable, and transparent rules established by NAFTA. And we are increasingly engaging into the global economy as one region. The paradigm example of North America production is the auto industry, but the aerospace industry is also becoming increasingly regional. Bombardier, the Canadian aerospace company, is a good example of an integrated North American operation where design and manufacturing are shared among the three countries. Bombardier Aerospace manufactures the fuselage and cockpit of the Learjet 85 business jet in Querétaro, which uses Pratt & Whitney turbines made in Quebec, and finally assembly takes place in Wichita, Kansas. Evidence of growing intra-regional investment can be seen in the percentage of U.S. value added in U.S. imports. Think about this. This added value of U.S. production is 2% when we buy something from Japan and from the European Union. It's 3% from imports from Brazil and 4% for Chinese imports. It is 25% for imports from Canada, but more than that is 40% for imports from Mexico. That is to say, U.S. imports from Mexico have 10 times more U.S. value added than U.S. imports from China. We cannot really talk about a Mexican product, a U.S. product, or even a Canadian product. We can talk about a North American product. Many of those numbers are encouraging, but if we are to take North American economic integration and competitiveness to take next level, we need to have much stronger and proactive engagement between the public and private sector and to truly think and act regionally. North America has the combination of geography, demographics, energy resources, and other capabilities necessary to become the most competitive region we are talking about. Let me highlight some of the assets and opportunities we share and the areas where we must work harder to turn this future vision into a reality. Estimates for the year 2050 say that the 7 largest economies in the world will be first China, second the US, third India, fourth Indonesia, fifth Brazil, sixth Japan, and 7 Mexico. Demographic estimates also say that by 2050, the US will have the highest per capita GDP growth among major economies, and Mexico will lead average growth numbers among the major Latin American economies in per capita terms. According to figures from the United Nations, the Population Division, in 2050, the North American region will have about 530 million inhabitants, more than those 454 million people who will be living in the European Union. When we consider demographic indicators, for Mexico and the US, we see better dependency ratios compared with Europe and younger population in North America comparatively with the European Union and China. We anticipate that our region will have a demographic advantage and that the demographic profiles are complementary. In contrast to other countries in Europe and Asia that will face serious challenges in declining total population, we will have a sustained and aging population. In demographics, North America has one of its strongest assets. According to the latest BP, the Energy Outlook, by 2035, North America will be a net oil exporter, accounting for 6% of global energy exports. And by 2017, not far away from us, the region could become a net exporter of natural gas. North America will be the only region in the world over that period that moves from being a net energy importer to a net exporter. So while China and Europe become more dependent on energy imports, North America will become self-sufficient. North America thus has necessary energy resources to fuel its economic growth for a long time. And reliable and affordable energy will be will be a key component in ensuring a very competitive region. However, we cannot afford to take each other for granted, these kind of elements, precisely because our high degree of interdependence and the great potential that still lies ahead. 2 decades of increased trade and investment mean that there is so much more that needs to be done. The world economy has changed radically over the last 2 decades. Services loom much larger now, as does e-commerce. And advanced manufacturing means that a high-skilled workforce, streamlined regulators, and vastly improved infrastructure and logistics, both at border crossing and throughout North America, will be critically important to take full advantage of our economic complementarities. In our North American region, Mexico is doing its part through a series of far-reaching economic reforms, engaging with the U.S. through a high-level economic group and a North American thought that is developed under the North American Leaders Summit process. We are doing our homework, I believe, in Mexico, mostly with those reforms that have changed the country massively in less than 20 months. However, we must continue to engage with the US and Canada to fully unleash the power of the Mexican economy. The rules established by NAFTA, which ensure a predictable framework for business planning and investment, were state-of-the-art in the early 90s, but we need to take into account transformations in technology, production and trade over the past decade to ensure that the region economic governance and infrastructure keep up with economic realities. For example, one of the most complex but at the same time needs that we have is in the regulatory system. What is going to be a sufficiently well-developed cell phone is something that the 3 governments have not decided. These are things in the most integrated auto industry. You know that Utah sells a lot of airbags to Mexico because of those cars that are produced in Mexico, we're the 4th producer of cars in the world, use those airbags that come from Utah. How is going to be the regulation of a good standard for an airbag to save lives? We have not decided that among the countries. And we check that in Mexico, check that in the US, and check that in Canada. Why cannot we check in one country and decide that it's going to be useful for the 3 of us? This is a chapter that we need to solve. We need to streamline customs, procedures, and invest in infrastructure to reduce border wait times, which cost us billions of dollars per year. We must also work with the private sector to develop world-class logistics that reduce the costly friction of cross-border trade and boost the competitiveness of this region. We should not simply increase the number of border crossings by fiat, but focus on improving the efficiency of crossing where trade flows are concentrated and trade volumes warrant improved infrastructure, more personnel, and longer operating hours. For example, the Undersecretary of DHS has a very firm rule that I believe in. We have to aim our resources to acknowledge what we do not know, to check what we do not know, and not aim so much to what we already know. That's why we are really keen in terms of pre-clearance process, and a lot of new laws in Mexico are being enacted in that direction. President Peña Nieto has spearheaded a flurry of reforms encompassing labor, education, financial service, fiscal policy, competition policy, and telecommunication, and of course, energy. There are still a lot of problems in Mexico, a lot of them, but the diagnosis has been done, I think, in good terms. And although those problems are there, the trend is to provoke those reforms in such a way that we really tackle the origin of our problems in terms of security, in terms of violence that is still there, not in terms of what the media say. If we put that in context, it's not so terrible, but one death is sufficient to take into consideration and act in that direction. But we have to act exactly in the roots of that. And all these reforms are exactly aimed at tackling the development situation, the socio-economic situation that are at the core of all these problems. The common aim behind this reform is to increase the productivity of the economy and to promote development, tranquility, and the possibility of Mexicans to develop as they should. Taken together, the reforms set basis for sustained high rates of growth for the Mexican economy. These reforms are complemented by the National Infrastructure Plan, which involves approximately $590 billion in public and private investment in over the next 5 years in more than 700 projects encompassing energy, communication, transportation, housing, urban development, health, and tourism. The showcase will be the new airport in Mexico City, which will be the largest airport in Latin America and a key hub connecting passengers and cargo with the region of the globe. What we have done during the 90s was a very well framework for trade, and I think we completed the task. During the 2000s, we did a great job in security cooperation, and the two countries talk a lot about how we can make this region a more secure and a better region. What is next, I think, is social part, the social connectivity, the way we understand each two countries in a more familiar way. When I was Director General for North America, I was asked many times, what would you do if you had the power to? And maybe creatively, I decided, well, what I would do is to have a class of Mexican history in all U.S. schools and a class of U.S. history in Mexico. Because in Mexico we study a lot of the Spaniards' history, but we are really involved in this relationship with our northern neighbors, and we are not doing that. But I would go beyond. Maybe I would put an NFL team in Mexico and a Major League Baseball team in Mexico. But I would put a team of women of football soccer here in the U.S. and a professional football of the Mexican Football Soccer League here in the U.S. as well. I would, if I had the power, put a Mexican, very interesting character in some of those very appealing Netflix series that are being broadcasted every day. That would provoke this familiarity. And I think we are in that direction. What is the Mexican government fostering today? An academic relationship. All those reforms present to my country a big task, the human capital to respond to what they will provoke. An energy reform that has ended the monopoly of a one state-owned company to exploit and produce and distribute energy in the country. Now, private sector can go there. Our regulatory system is sufficient enough to regulate that? My answer is yes, but needs help, needs human capital, needs professionals. So we started a dialogue on that with the United States. And our goal is very interesting, but we are going to put in the US 100,000 Mexican students from here to 2018. And beyond that, we're going to put 50,000 US students in Mexican institutions that today has 1,800 internationally well-received and recognized international programs of studying. So we are doing that so that this familiarity is going to grow, maybe not with a Netflix program, but yes, with a lot of scholarships that are going to be very, very helpful for the country. That is exactly the message, that we are going to foster that relationship in those terms, because the bases are for that, and the aims are exactly the competitiveness of the region and to understand how complicated, how integrated, how intense is this relationship, that is not going to be a simple trade relationship, not a simple cooperation in terms of security, but much more than that, an understanding of the social relationship that is already there. Let me go to a conclusion here. With a forward-looking vision and decisive action, our two countries can build a closer relationship and turn North America into the most competitive region in the world. And every step forward we take in mutual understanding will pay dividends in the collaborative North American project that holds the key to prosperous future for our peoples. So, I'm so emotion and appeal for addressing such a big audience of people who understands, because you are in the academic sector, how important is these social trends that we are building. Once again, let me express my gratitude to David Kennedy Center for International Studies at the Brigham Young University for allowing me to share the Mexican view, a real view very focused in which all the Mexican government is particularly clear that we are going in that direction for the future of this region, North America, and the great opportunities to await us as a region. Thank you very much, and thank you for this point. Thank you. I'm very open, and the most important part comes now, which is your questions, your worries, your belief that what is missing. All that is something that I have to take back to Washington and to work in that direction. So, as I was saying, you are very, very important for me in this moment. There's one done.
Given American demands for drugs and Mexican cartels' willingness to provide those drugs, how does Mexico hope to achieve the economic growth you described?
It's a very important question. And last week, we had the bilateral meeting between the Mexican and the US government in terms of security. And much of this factor was analyzed. We have a good structure of cooperation, but we have a huge problem at the same time. Of course, the demand of drugs is there, and the supply of drugs from Mexico and towards Mexico is there. And as the problem is there and the demand is there, when you tackle one part, it starts sparking in other areas. At the same time, one of the diagnoses that we had is that Mexican government during the 70s and 80s and half of the 90s was oblivious about a factor that when only the traffic was going up, we as a government were not having a big problem domestically. But that problem started to be because of two big reasons, although I'm very, very schematic. One was that was some payment in weapons. So it was northbound was drugs, southbound was weapons, and Mexico became full of weapons. And the gunpowder of the drug cartels started to be absolutely threatening. Secondly, some of the drug was paid in stuff. So the cartels, instead of being hiding in the countryside, they decided to have a domestic market. So they went to that domestic market. The third part of the problem is that when the Mexico government reacted to that keenly, with a lot of effort, doing a tough job in which a lot of killing is there because the fight is tough. What happened is that that level of violence, when you cut the head of a cartel, the cartel loses its capacity in terms of the relationship that it has with the cartels here in the United States. And two phenomena happen immediately. One is that the group starts to do something else beyond, as well as drug trafficking. And they go to kidnapping, to extortion, and to different other activities. And we have faced that, and it's part of the problem. Here in the United States happens two things. The price of the drug increases, and the quality diminishes. When we succeed, that also happens. And you have some health problems in there. But your question is very relevant in terms of, is that harming a lot the process of disintegration? And my answer is not so much. Although we have to do something in that area, and we have to work very closely in a very comprehensive way, understanding that this is as well a regional problem that comes from the northern part of the southern South America, Colombia, that area, all the way through Central America and goes and ends in Canada. It's a very regional problem, and we have to cooperate in that region. But the levels of investment in Mexico have not diminished so terribly. The violence in Mexico is focused and terribly focused in some areas. When we have managed to control one area, it sparks another, mostly in areas in which two cartels are fighting because of a territory they are wanting to achieve from another. When you succeed in cutting the head of a cartel, maybe it splits in 2 or 3 groups, and they start to fight against each other. That provokes violence, and it's difficult to do. But that's focused in areas. At the same time, we have a problem of image. not diminish the terrible situation that is there in terms of security. That doesn't mean that we have to put that in context. The level of killing in Mexico, that one killing is sufficient to do something and to reject and to lament and to be aware and to act. But we have 17 killings per 100,000 inhabitants as a standard, and it's less than many of the US cities. You cannot imagine how less than Brazil, than Honduras, than Guatemala, than Costa Rica, even at the level of Costa Rica. We have a goal. We have to diminish that to 10, to 11. 11 is the international standard. All around the world is 11. We're in 17. We have to do that. We are, if you see the figures, in good trend, not enough. The last year was a clear diminish in all those levels of violence in the country. The investors know that, and they read about Mexico and they analyze in deeper way the country, and they know that some areas, myself, I would not go. Some areas of Mexico, some cities, and some areas of those cities. But the vast majority of the country is tranquil. We shift in this administration the perspective from hitting and fighting directly the criminals. We still hit them, but we also try to tackle the roots of the problem in a more comprehensive way. And we also try to diffuse information very transparently about the clear context of this level of violence. And we have succeeded. We had a terrible situation last September in the case of a local authority absolutely corrupt and linked with an organized crime that for a terrible moment thought that the presence of some students in an act of violence, but not a terrible act of violence, but an act of violence in Iguala, Guerrero, was an act of the contrary gang, and they decided to kill them. So we had a terrible act of violence that provoked the disappearance of 43 students last 26th of September because of this terrible situation that put into the surface a big problem that we have, in which my presence here in a state like Utah becomes more relevant. The name of the game now is how we can foster the institutions and the capabilities of our local authorities, the state police, the municipality police, that in some cases in Mexico you would not believe that some police of the municipality area, we have more than 2,000 police, well disconnected, with a lot of problems among them, some very good, some very bad. But some of them have 5 members. How they can fight an organized crime organization? It's very complicated. So that showed the level of problematic that we have in terms of these local police. The president immediately came with 10 actions. One of them, the only one I would discuss, is that we're enacting, now is in hands of the Congress, the decision to put all those police in a single state police entity, so that the coordination and the capacity to react from one municipality to another is there. Because if we're going to fight 90 armed drug traffickers with a 5, 4, 7 members police, you cannot. So you need a state integrated police. We are in that direction. The problem is there, yes, it's very big, but if you go deeper into the country and you analyze it very well, it is not halting investment and the optimism that we, members of government, and most of the Mexican society is having in this process. Last but not least, civil society in Mexico has grown dramatically and has been very active, and I believe in it. And the way Mexicans are using the social networks, the internet, that has provoked a way of accountability that was never there in my country, and I'm feeling proud of it. And I would foster it anyway. So, for example, today I talked with the governor of Utah, and I was very happy to talk about that he's going to be the chair of the National Governors Association. And he is going to invite Mexican governors, and we are going to make the first trilateral Canada, US, and Mexico governors meeting. If that provokes that those Mexican governments express their experience and at the same time receive best practices, that will help to this process of all these problems that we are facing in our country. Here and then that and then that. Okay. Yeah.
Since the incarceration of better result of the way narcotraficos are being incarcerated? And also, do you have any plans to extradite him to the United States to be prosecuted for crimes committed here?
The toughest question in town. Well, he was a very emblematic figure. His cartel is very difficult to say, was very strong, but was at the moment not having an incredibly relevant presence in terms of violence, although one of his split groups was in part culprit for what happened in Guerrero and Oaxaca. But what is important about your question, because it's very difficult to know if something has changed. We have captured in the past those kind of heads of cartels, and part of the solution is there, but at the same time, some others take part of it. What is important for me to say is that it is part exactly where we have to go. Analyzing the case of Chapo, what you see is that the name of the game for the Mexico-U.S. cooperation is in terms of the financial assets of these groups. We have to go in that direction because part of his control of a territory that now is not going to be anymore there. But the rest is his assets, and they're not only in Mexico, they're all around the world. And to tackle that and to work with many countries in such a way that we can diminish the capacity of moving that is what is going to really diminish his presence. About him being extradited, well, the rules are there. He has committed so many crimes in Mexico and so many crimes in the US. So the rules are like this. We have an agreement, that's why I'm saying that we are very mature in terms of security, that after capturing him and being sentenced in Mexico, that means many legal process that, and I will make here a parenthesis, in which you become as well relevant again. Mexico decided to change its criminal system from a Napoleonic French style to something more known by you, which is an Anglo-Saxon adversarial, I don't know how to say that in English, adversativo, oral system, like the one you know. We had 2016 to accomplish that. At this moment, 4 states had already done. We are 31, so we are in a hurry. And there has to be also the federal system. So we're going to do that, and we need the human capital to do that. Let's go back to this. So we have to send, that's why I'm saying this is important, but one of the factors that this system will bring is faster, swifter, and transparent processes so that we can decide and sentence someone faster. Maybe he will receive part of this treatment, maybe no, depends. After sentencing him, we have a system in which we can lend, and the verb is correct, lend him to be here in the United States so that he can be relevant for process of the crimes that he committed here. This agreement tries to tackle the problem that sometimes, because of having someone there in Mexico and waiting for his sentence to be executed and paid, he's going to be 300 years in Mexico. So it's difficult that the witness and all the people that are going to make charges against him in the US are going to be there. So you can lend him for a process here. After that, he goes back to Mexico, he pays for the sentence that he had, and then comes here. So technically it's very complex, but yes, he could be in US territory under the legal means and cooperation system that the two countries have, but we still have to wait for all those processes to be in place. It's a little technical, but it goes like that. There was a question there, you, and then here. Thank you. Yes?
I just have a quick question. You just discussed a little bit about Ayotzinapa, but how can these reforms work when there are conflicts of interest and these scandals that have been going in the previous months with Grupo IGA and the First Lady, Angelica Rivera, the President, and Luis Videgaray Caso that involve corruption? So how can these reforms that are ambitious work in a country where people do not trust the government?
The situation, and before that, of having a more accountable government and best practices has been in the government since the beginning. Those cases, I understand perfectly that you are mentioning them. But since his campaign, the president presented the possibility of having a ruled by the citizens system of anti-corruption. And now the law, that crossed a lot of discussion, political discussion among the parties. The president put a lot of political capital in pushing the reforms, as well as this case of anti-corruption. The maneuver of politics helped him in some areas, not so much in others. It was because of this balance of power. So the one about anti-corruption lasted more, but it was there, and we were keen and insistent in having it. Now the new system, the new legal proposal is there in the Congress. I'm confident that it will cross, and it will help for exactly what you are saying, that there is a lack of confidence for the Mexican society in general about the authorities in all levels. It's something that a Mexican, in general terms, knows that it's a country, a tranquil country in which you can work and you can develop, but in terms of your relationship with the government, our democracy is still with a lot of imperfection. For example, not only in the area of anti-corruption, in the area of representativeness. You know that Mexico had a lot of electoral problems in the past. We managed to have one of the best democratic systems today to count votes. We are the state of the art, and we give even cooperation help to many countries about how to put an electoral box, to make the ballots, to cross them, an ink that all Mexicans know that can be in your thumb for more than a week, and you cannot erase it with nothing. But that is counting votes. Does Mexicans feel represented? There's a lack there. If I ask all the Mexicans, there should be many here, in their places of origin, who is his representative? I can bet that nobody of them could mention his representative. Because we are not used to write to our representative. We're not used to ask our representative to represent us. So that is the kind of immaturity that is still in the government. The process are in that direction. I believe yes, a lot is missing, but at least at this moment, this law is in front of the Congress, and we hope that it's going to provoke some kind of a change. And let me complement with what I'm really trusting in, which is exactly your question, your presence, and all those Mexicans, because civil society in Mexico is incredibly active. You cannot imagine how much, and they are really asking for accountability at this moment. Was here, sorry, here and then there.
So my question is, how do you think the legalization of all drugs would affect the drug trafficking in Mexico? And do you think it would be a good effect or a negative?
You said the legalization of, and you put an emphasis in all drugs. It's a very complex factor. You know that what I have heard is that the state of Colorado is still having, it's very difficult to measure at this level, but it's not feeling that the cases of crime are diminishing. So the Mexican position is like this. We are very, very open to think out of the box, because what we have been doing has not been so effective as we would like to. But we are not at the other side of the spectrum saying that legalization is going to be a solution as a magic thing that is going to solve the problem, because of many different things. First is that it's very difficult that that the legalization could be of all drug and in all places. Any kind of legalization would be gradual in some drugs and in some places. And that provokes a lot of gaps in which you are not so sure what is going to happen. Some analysts, and it's very debated, say that a legalization of marijuana, in the case of Mexico, would provoke a good business-oriented phase for some of the drug cartels. I am dedicated to marijuana, and I trade with marijuana. Under the water, I'm trading with all other drugs in which I have a profit. So there are some, for example, some analysis by the OEA that say, well, you have to control that in hands, like the pharmacies that you have here, in hands of the government, saying, okay, marijuana is going to be legal, but it's not in hands of anyone. It's not a private area. It starts being very, very complex. What is important to say is that it's not a magic solution. And in the case of Mexico, in terms of violence, I would say it's not legalization or legalization. The truth is deployment of an authority that shows to the society that the crime activity is not going to be impugned. What happened in Mexico in many areas, not in the whole country, in some areas, is that a park, a street, started not to be in hands and in control of the only entity that can use force, the state, the authority, the government, start to be in hands of someone else. When you deploy, because of lack of investment, because of your authority for that area, someone is going to fill it. And the name of the game is not so only legalization or no legalization, it's the real presence or not presence of this authority. If you legalize, you will need a big, huge, important, capable, professional authority to be there. If you do not legalize, you will need a capable, professional authority to be there. So at this moment, we want to think out of the box. We are very open to the discussion, but we are very careful that it's not going to be a fast solution. Someone was there. He was this since the beginning.
And this will need to be the last question.
Oh, well, but he was for a long time raising this.
Obama recently made an executive order on immigration in November. What's your view on his call for reform?
It's something about demographic and economics. I'm happy. I was in this relationship for many years. In the late 90s, early 2000s, we were talking about migration in very cultural and very emotional terms. Now the debate is more in economics and acknowledging what the Mexicans, documented and undocumented, have done in terms of giving something to the society that has hosted them. They pay taxes, they do something for the economy, they try to work, and they're important. The growth level of the US society today is about a little bit less than 2 births for every woman. And that is a little bit below the standard that internationally is to preserve a population in a good pyramid. In Mexico it's 2.4. I was saying here that we were in the 70s, 6 births per mother. Now we're 2.4. Inside the US, not here in Utah, but in many other areas, the population, the Caucasic population, is growing 1.6, 1.7. And the Mexican, Latino community is growing 2.4, so the balance is there. So, because, Latino vote, all those reasons, new elections are going to take in consideration all this new population. I was in a conference this morning, and someone said a figure that was amazing, that every 30 minutes a new Latino goes inside as a voting possibility. He has 18 years old. And 2 Caucasian go for retirement. So it's going to be incredibly relevant. So we need a solution for that, and we do have to acknowledge that. And has been tried for many years. Since I have memory and I've been involved in diplomacy, has been a try. So the important thing is to have this comprehensive reform done by the Congress. But because of many reasons, it has been impossible. So in something that is appealing for us, the president decides to acknowledge these benefits that the Mexican population, the Latino population is providing, and make these 2 decisions. I think at the end of the game, something is going to be there. So the Mexican position is this. We have to have well-informed applicants. So we are working with all our network of consulates. First, to avoid abuses, because immediately a lot of intermediaries spark and ask $20 for the Mexicans that do not know, are confused, and it's confusing. Washington is confusing. And they start hearing a lot of things. So the consul here, who is great, really does a great job all the time, he has to spend a lot of time with many associations and diffusing information so that we, all Mexicans, follow and understand what is exactly happening. And we're, for example, very, very clear that DACA is still there, the program is there. It's only DACA extended that is at this moment suspended, and DAPA is suspended. He has to explain that, and it's sophisticated. First is that. Secondly, we have blitz in terms of documentation. We are being asked by all the Mexican population and since this year, we can issue a birth certificate for any part of Mexico in the consulate. So that means a lot of work. So we are following very closely, and at the end, we think is going to happen something there. But the important thing is to diffuse accurate and well information for all those possible applicants. So they're going to be there as possible beneficiaries of this. That's all. I have to go because they take me. But I thank you very, very much. It has been a great audience. I love this university. Thank you.